Thank you everybody so much for joining, and thank you to my panelists, I really appreciate it. So welcome to the SIP connectivity panel. We have some of our favorite customers up here that are using SIP connectivity, either elastic SIP trunking or SIP interfaces today at Twilio. So just logistics-wise, if you want to ask questions, yes, they're showing up there and up there. Go to slido.com on your devices, type in #SIP, and just submit your questions online, and then Bill and Quinn from my team are just going to help us kind of like moderate the questions coming in. So with that, I'm going to turn it off to the experts. So I'll just ask you if you can introduce yourselves, a little bit about the company, what your company does, and which Twilio product you're using for SIP. Awesome.
I can start. Yeah, I can start. So, hi everyone. My name is Pierre Baptiste. I am CTO account follower at Aircall. So, Aircall, in 2 words, is a company that is building a product which is a phone system for companies. We allow our customers to buy phone numbers in 40 countries around the world and to make and receive calls through apps. They can collaborate on those phone calls, and they can integrate all the data from these calls into the tools they are already using, like Salesforce, Zendesk, HubSpot, etc. And we have been using Twilio since 3 years, and especially all the SIP connectivity products in order to expand our worldwide reachability.
I'm Heath Eldine. I'm a director of software engineering at Weave, and we use, what we do is business phone systems and integrated communications for small businesses. So we provide a deep integration with their CRM and all their communication products for them talking to their customers. We use elastic SIP trunking primarily because we've got a lot of our own soft switch built out. And we've been a Twilio customer for, I think, 5 years or so.
I'm Cedar Coleman. I'm the Director of Operations for Voice and Messaging products with GoDaddy. Primarily right now we're using elastic SIP trunking to integrate our existing voice management systems into Twilio's products, but actually going to be integrating a lot more.
I'm Jenna Ha. I am the Director of Operations at Splice Software. I've been on Splice for about 5 years, and we utilize Twilio SIP trunking for reducing customer attrition and improving customer experience with our clients.
Hi, Carmine Ciccarelli, Director of Service, Delivery, and Workplace Technology at WW, formerly Weight Watchers. We've used programmable voice and SIP trunking as a foundational element to our service for call centers around the world, and are continuing to scale today.
Awesome, thank you. So I think to get started, it's really cool that each one of you uses our SIP products in a very different use case. So if you can just go through and explain to us what use case are you using SIP with, and just tell the audience a little bit more about kind of like how you're using Twilio SIP, and if you can just say why you actually chose Twilio at a brief sentence at the end, I think that would be very insightful. We'll just go around.
Yeah, I can start. So first of all, when we started to use a Twilio product, it was mostly SIP domains in order to handle inbound traffic. Why? Because we had phone numbers all around the world with different providers, and instead of porting those numbers to Twilio, either it's because it was a long cost, it was expensive, or because it was hard to do. We used SIP domains to forward the inbound traffic to Twilio and to start building mostly the application part with the WebRTC programmable voice products. And we are also using SIP out interfaces in order to use our own carriers in regions where we have more traffic or more specific needs.
So we are providing business phone systems for tens of thousands of small businesses across the United States. So we needed SIP trunking for that, but we also needed to provide these other communication services. So we needed a company that help us do both voice and SMS. So Twilio was kind of obvious there. Probably answered your last question first. But we have a lot of our own infrastructure built out for our soft switch because of our integrations. Part of the reason we have all that is probably because we started so long ago. If we were to start building today, we could probably just use a lot more of what Twilio has. That probably wasn't as available or as far along as it is today. But we've got an open source soft switch that we've built using products like Giulio and FreeSwitch that we use to integrate with the SIP trunking to provide business phones.
So similarly, GoDaddy, we're offering several different products, but the idea being small business. And when we say small at GoDaddy, we mean very small, like sub-5 employee businesses, often sole proprietors, enabling them to kind of stop just using their cell phone for their business. So we already have an infrastructure that dates back to our first carriers we interacted with were through TDM line cards and ISDN, and we didn't want to scrap all of the technology that we have existing. So we interact with a lot of SIP carriers, and moving to Twilio or adding Twilio into the mix, I should say, has been a really good way to start leveraging the technology platform that Twilio has that none of those other carriers have really caught up with. Several of them are trying to make strides in that direction, but for myself, supporting thousands and thousands of concurrent call sessions, if any one of those has a problem and a support agent in our call center has a question about it, and it escalates up to someone on my team, they can actually use the dashboard on Twilio to look at metrics and analytics of that call. And of the dozens of other carriers that we interop with over SIP, not one of them gives you any kind of visibility like that. So the why for Twilio, the technology and the usability is just infinitely ahead of anybody else right now.
Yeah, so we use SIP trunking with our proprietary software that does a lot with the client journey and how they engage with their customers and how they're able to manage their brand and ensure that customer experience is really there. So the SIP trunking just kind of backs onto that. And a lot to what these guys have said as well, it's a lot of the reliability and the scalability that Twilio is able to provide. And a lot of it is to do with the relationships we've built with the people at Twilio as well. A lot of their culture and team environment is very similar to ours, so we found that to be really great to work with, really easy to work with, and they just have all the tools available on top of that, so it's been great.
Not unlike any other or most other Twilio customers who are enterprises, we're continuously improving our member experience, and a few years ago started to look at overhauling our retail call centers. And as I mentioned, Twilio was centerpiece to the service design underlying to the overall call center service globally that we've been rolling out over the last 24 months. So the first thing that we did was kind of start to act like our own service provider within our enterprise, where we've collapsed several global telecom providers who were providing inbound voice services to us, to Twilio, and built kind of like our own voice routing application that allows us to take calls from anywhere in the world and from our members and be able to route them to any number of SIP endpoints, be it a call center outsourced, be it an in-house call center agent, or be it an offshore agent of some kind. So our first step was really to build this voice routing application, and then as we've cut over call centers globally, we've used Elastic SIP trunking for things like callbacks from each of the regions. So we've found it extremely useful, extremely scalable.
Awesome, thank you so much. Bill and Quinn, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we have one question to start with from the audience. It's for the panel. Can you share your experiences with using SIP products in Asia-Pac? And have you run into latency challenges, and how did you mitigate them? I'm assuming that would also apply to EMEA as well. So
I know I'll start turn on PB. You're using this in EMEA, so maybe you can comment a little bit about that.
Yeah, so no, in EMEA, one of the features, I guess, which was very important for us was the ability to select the region where we want to do SIP connectivity. After that, depending on, it's not linked to a specific region, but it helps us to reduce latency and to be sure that we are using the best setup for our customers.
And are any of you using us in Asia Pac? I don't believe so, but figure it out. So I would just add the one thing that comes up quite a bit is making sure that you use the regionalized URIs when addressing Twilio SIP. So definitely use the region that's closer to where your infrastructure is. That usually helps a lot with the latency. And you can also add a SIP parameter for the egress calls, where it's essentially you do a dial SIP where you just put your origination URIs, make sure you have the region parameter to select the egress region when going out as close to your infrastructure as possible. That's usually helpful as well. Let's see, Bill, do we have anything else?
Yeah, we just got another one again with regard to Asia and Europe is how do you deal with legal requirements for local termination of PSTN calls, e.g. in Asia, Europe, if you're using centralized trunks through Twilio?
I don't know if anybody has experience on that.
I guess we trust Twilio is doing everything great on that front. Otherwise, like having the possibility to plug our own carriers helped us to do this own legal setup if needed. So, for example, if you want to operate locally with Russian companies, you need to do a specific legal setup over there. So we are doing that ourselves before that Twilio did implement it. So it helps to have an open platform for that.
Cool. So I think there was one question right behind you, Bill. There's a gentleman behind you that wanted to ask a question. We can just...
I've actually got a couple questions. My first question is, can you talk a little bit about the reliability of the Elastic SIP trunks? The carrier that we're currently using, we're not overly thrilled with how reliable their SIP trunks are, and so I'm interested to know how reliable the Twilio SIP trunks are.
I mean, I can speak for, we have several carriers in the mix with our SIP trunking, and we push most of our calls to Twilio. They are as reliable as any of the tier 1 carriers that we've paid more to have direct interconnectivity with, and just easier to work with. So I mean, reliability is something that I just kind of put as table stakes, at least in the business. So if we had concerns, we wouldn't have done business with Twilio, and it's just something that doesn't really cross our mind.
So you don't have issues with the SIP trunks dying certain times?
No.
Just,
no.
No? Okay. My second question is, we looked at Elastic SIP trunking through Twilio, but we kind of felt like their maintenance cost was a bit on the high side. And I'm just kind of curious if you all have their support agreement so that you can call them versus just sending them an email if you're having a problem, or what you've done with that. Thank you.
We've always paid for the premium support. I can speak from experience that any time we've had service issues, they have been resolved in a timely manner. As far as reliability and quality, when those types of incidents happen, which is highly infrequently, they are momentary. So it kind of speaks to the ability for Twilio to be nimble in routing around issues within the own super network. So,
yeah, typically when our SIP trunk goes down, it's down for 2 or 3 days before it's back up. So, and it's a major carrier. I'm not going to mention any names, but it's not pretty. Thanks.
Is it a privately connected type of a network? Is that? Yeah.
Okay, another question over here.
Have you guys experienced any problems with rural call delivery?
No, I don't. Like, we go pretty much everywhere throughout the US and Canada, and it's pretty reliable. Like, to his point, we do have some other providers, but we do most of our stuff through Twilio, and it hasn't really been an issue at all.
Yeah, there's a dashboard that you get with the service that allows you to inspect completion rates, and we experience and observe very high completion rates as well.
Okay.
Just kind of curious, any of the rest of you pay for the premium support?
Yeah, we pay for it too, and I mean, we've had the same experience as everyone else has said. The few problems we've had, we escalate them and they're resolved immediately. It's worked really well for us.
Yes, we try at Aircall pay for premium support. One of the things I can add to complete is that I find that this provider has really bring a lot more transparency compared to other providers. So for example, I don't know if you showed the announcement about Voice Insights that showed on a per-call basis metrics like packet loss, jitter, latency, whatever. And we were one of the, we helped them to build also as a pilot this product. And it brings a lot of transparency just because we have the raw data, so we can just challenge each other, either Aircall or Twilio, based on actual facts and not feelings.
Let me ask one question. Jenna, you mentioned something about using Twilio because the culture was similar to Splice. Can you comment a little bit more about what about the Twilio culture did you actually like? And maybe anybody else that want to comment to that, I think that could be interesting.
Sure, yeah. So I guess we kind of live the work hard, play hard mentality. So there's a lot of like dedication and commitment and passion from the team at both Splice and Twilio. So you see people who are working way after business hours, but they do what it takes to get the job done. And just, I've been here, I think it's my third or fourth signal, and we've gotten pretty close to a lot of the team members, and I can tell you a lot of the Twilio guys know how to party as well, so. Outside of that, like everyone knows how to make work fun, so like even as these guys were talking about having the few issues that you do have to talk to Twilio about, they're doing a really good job of trying to make that more interactive, making sure that you're comfortable with it, and just everyone is still having a good experience and not really feeling the pain.
I guess I can bring an anecdote like that as well. About a year and a half ago, I think we had an issue where one of the carriers that we were sending calls to in order to stitch together our members and coaches for one-on-one coaching sessions, were having failures, and the support person that was assigned to this case ended up, stepping way above and beyond what normal Call of Duty was, and was able to give us packet captures from the failed calls, and ending up being able to help us isolate which carriers we were sending to that were problematic. So I think pretty much everybody's going to have anecdotes like that. So definitely a strong culture for service.
Okay. Next question up on the list is, how do you as customers combat robocalls or spam over your SIP implementations with Twilio?
So not particularly robocalls, but we do get nuisance callers into the call center from time to time. We just simply implemented the blacklist feature. So that voice routing application that I spoke about before has some additional feature set that we built in, blacklist being one of them. Very easy to do.
Yeah, I can tell you that if you contact support, they can usually help you with those things. So, the next question is, and I'm not sure if this is, I guess this is for Annie, is why are there different pricing zones for call pricing?
I think I missed the question. Why are there different pricing?
Why are there different pricing zones for call pricing? Oh, okay. So I'm assuming on per region.
I can address this. So one thing that we started looking into, especially I'll address that, because in the US we have different pricing zones. So there's zone 1 through 5. And essentially we wanted to give you the lowest price possible, but there's some regions in the US that are kind of like very rare, like rural areas that we're not able to get as low a price point. So we created this concept of zones where we have zone 1, which is our cheapest price at 007, where we try and lump, I think it's around 80 or 90% of all the US prefixes are part of zone 1s. And then we go zones 2 through 5 that kind of get to these special prefixes or rural areas that is just more expensive to route towards. So even though it is a little bit painful to say, well, you have to look at the actual prefix and PA and XX that you're dialing to actually determine what's the price in the US, but it's the way we're able to get you the best rates for the majority of the prefixes. So that's a little bit of the history there.
Okay, a question for the panel. What other SIP providers are you using or did you consider using before or while you're using Twilio?
Yeah, I can start with one. So before we are considering one competitor called Plivo from compared to Twilio, and we migrated from Plivo to Twilio 3 years ago. The main reason was reliability. Like really, since 3 years we didn't experiment any huge issue more than few minutes. So that's why we switched at that point.
Keith, how about you?
When we started out, we were originally all on one provider that we're not using anymore, and they went down all the time. And so, in kind of a panic, knee-jerk reaction, we spread out across 6 different providers, and then realized that was really hard to maintain. So we've consolidated it down to 3, and it's mostly just in case one of them had a problem, we could shift traffic across. But it's at this point, with how reliable Twilio and our other provider are, it's not really a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, with GoDaddy and through acquisition, Freedom Voice, one of our brands, we at one time I think had as many as 12 different SIP termination only carriers, and because pricing was more aggressive between carriers, I honestly couldn't even remember the name of some of them, but if you take the words tone, link, dial, and bright, and just throw them all in a bag and start pulling out and putting them in random orders, you'll probably come up with a few actual companies. And it used to be that if you were calling Dubuque, Iowa, one carrier might give you 0.003 of a cent a minute better rate there, but then they were 5 cents a minute, more. I'm just throwing random numbers out in, another area. So you wanted to have this huge spread. And honestly, since, bringing Twilio on board, almost a year ago, we've ripped out all but like our 2 or 3 core carriers. And even that we're still paring down. So, there are a lot of options out there, not necessarily a lot of good options though.
So let me add one more question here. Is if you were to start again with Twilio trunking from the beginning, what would be the one advice you would give a new customer that's starting to use Twilio SIP today if they were to get started? And I'll open it up to anybody that would want to share any experiences.
I think the biggest thing we would do differently is take advantage of the APIs more. We've got some of our integration through the APIs and other things that people are still going in through the console and doing. And even things that we've automated through the APIs, people are still going in through the console and doing, which is kind of a pain because then we don't have the audit on our side. But I would just say take advantage of the APIs from the get-go. Twilio has the best set of APIs that I've seen for SIP trunking. I mean, you can do everything through it, except for porting.
We're working on that.
Awesome. But yeah, I just use the APIs, build to those, and don't rely on the console too much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say the console is also pretty user-friendly depending on who you're sharing it with. So people who don't know APIs as much would be able to use the console and still take advantage of all the great things that it offers. I would also say the documentation has gotten insanely better since when I first started, so like 4 years ago. So use the documentation and don't be afraid to ask questions. Again, the team and the culture is great and everyone's just kind of there to help you. So just be aware of that and there are no real dumb questions.
I guess my 2 would be to be judicious about how you implement sub-accounts. That greatly help your reporting capabilities later on, and how you segment your traffic for analysis. And then the second thing would be definitely look at implementing health checks down to any peers that you're sending lots of traffic to. Great and better practice to detect the problems before you start sending calls places.
A new question just came in. Are any of you?
Phil, give me 1 second. I think Cedar had one.
I was just going to add that using SIP trunking, if you already have an existing voice infrastructure, is great and really easy to configure with Twilio. But I would even look at programmable voice, because a lot of things that you may be doing in-house, it would be a lot easier and faster to use programmable voice for in conjunction with SIP trunking. So.
So are any of you doing T38 fax over your SIP lines? And if so, what steps have you taken to make sure it works?
T38.
Yes, we do. And I wish we didn't. Fax will die the day I get a jetpack. I'm convinced of that. Because jetpacks are like 5 years away, and fax is 5 years away from dying somewhere, flying car or whatever. We do use T38 with some carriers. The renegotiate through our SBCs is not super reliable, and then even when you do get a good T38 connection negotiated and things go through, the reception isn't always, or the fax doesn't always go through, is because of either the sending software or the receiving software. So we honestly are trying to push people away from trying to transmit as T38 and either doing fax just as voice where we absolutely have to, or ideally taking it, telling the customer it's a fax, sending it electronically, and then letting it be delivered at the other end.
We have a lot of medical customers, and in the medical field, fax is grandfathered in as HIPAA compliant. It's safe and secure somehow. We struggled with supporting it for a long time. We spent a lot of time troubleshooting. And we've actually pushed a lot of that over to Twilio's fax service. So we don't even deal with it anymore. We just let Twilio handle it, and it's worked surprisingly well. The few cases where things weren't working, we've been able to just go to Twilio and have them help us out.
So I think we have time for one last question.
Yeah, I think we're down to about 3 minutes left. So there's one here. It's why did you choose Twilio for SIP? You may have already kind of answered it.
Yeah, I can start. Mainly because SIP was an entry point for all other things like WebRTC, programmable voice, and so on. So having one provider to handle this from A to Z was really valuable and was the main reason to choose one provider over the others.
Very similar. So we wanted a global platform that we could build on and continue to iterate on for some time. And supporting that would be the reliability and service level.
So maybe I'll ask a different question. What do you wish Twilio provided that we don't provide today from a SIP connectivity perspective?
Streamlined international porting numbers.
Okay.
The ability to move numbers between trunks without disabling and then re-enabling E911.
Okay. And I'm taking mental notes, so don't feel I'm just ignoring them. Cool. So with that, I want to thank my panelists. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you being Twilio SIP customers. And thank you everybody else for joining us. Thank you for coming. I know it's the last session of the day. I really appreciate you being here.